Okay, so those are people on Zoom.
Massachusetts and Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont,
I don't know, I see about 10 people.
New Hampshire.
So you know how to put your slides
And
on
then
here?
above that, where we went to
Share. You put your, yeah, share.
town. Yes, New Hampshire.
Okay, we're watching.
Okay, cool. I'll talk to you later, Ira. Have a good one.
Rabbi has 2:10.
Okay.
Okay, catch you later. Bye. Oh, there's the rabbi. There's Ken. Yep. Bye.
He has to give you permission, I think. Yeah. That's right, yeah. So if he makes you, it might work now if you're co-host. There you go.
Thanks. Mute.
Having trouble. Pinch out for a bigger view.
I will. Put it to, click right here for slideshow, right there. No, it's one over. Go over. Yeah. And now have display settings. No, do display settings, yeah. And do swap presenter. Yeah,
They're controlling us.
there you go.
We're not.
And now what happens if you slide advance? Yeah.
But I want to see the other figure.
Yeah, there it is. Oh, you don't want that? Oh, sorry.
I want what we had before.
That's what you had before, I think.
No,
No?
like,
Oh, okay. Oh, then,
There are 20 people who start to do it.
this. So I have the notes.
oh, okay. Are you happy with that? That's what you wanted?
Yep.
October was.
I do this a lot, and I don't, I do the other way, but, okay.
But then if they see my screen, they will see this.
Yeah,
And what we want is to see that.
yeah, that was what I showed you.
My screen has the notes. That's what you want to see?
That's what they'll see. If that's what you want, that's okay.
Can't you do it so they see the other screen?
Yeah, but you can't then see the notes simultaneously.
Right. Right. So this is defined as another screen. So it can be seen.
What can you see?
I don't know, sorry.
Every section. Can I?
I only know what I set it up in my classes. I don't know.
Yeah,
And this
No.
one. And then just share that.
down
Yeah.
there.
Or even just screen two. I think that should be fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Can you see now this screen?
Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you.
Good thing you're there.
That's right.
Lots of reasons to stay together.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh, right over here. We'll invite people who are on Zoom to, they want to present in the chat and do a little, well, you'll be able to see them on chat on their screen, so, which again, I think will be easier when you got the microphone for you. So you can repeat the question.
Hear us, and they hear us.
What, can you find people who are interested in doing the interpretation on the back? You might want to mute everybody for the rest of the meeting. Yeah, I'll you got that, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody gets unruly. So Tal, how long do you expect to be talking for, so I can tell people? Have you got-
30 to 40 minutes.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Just about for everybody on Zoom. Just hello everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us. We're not quite ready to start yet, but we're getting there. Just wanted you to know that you will, of course, be able to hear and see Tal. You can see that he's sharing his screen already. And you can being on Zoom is you can also chat. So if you have questions that come up while he's speaking, feel
my microphone will be on.
You'll be able to unmute sometime
Iya
later.
boleh, Shishmo.
That picture good.
I'm not sure. We can hear him both, but then they need me to hear me talking.
Oh yeah, I can mute. Like you can mute. I think all. So you can.
Might be interesting.
You can mute so that others. Right?
No, he's the host and he's muting everybody.
Okay. So do you want? So do you want me to?
I guess leave it. Right.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, he's good.
I'm muting myself also, just so you
Which I said.
So we have about, Rabbi, we have about 10 people on Zoom, do I understand? We have about 10 people on Zoom? Really? Wow, I'm impressed. Oh, I pull my notes. Oh, here are my notes.
Without faces, so I can use them. I'm going to say pictures without faces, so they can.
All
I
right,
can use them.
I think we're about ready to start. Yes, are we? I'm waiting for the technology people to say go. Oh, go ahead. Okay, great. Well, welcome all the people live who braved the terrible weather. No dead people. And to the people on Zoom, welcome live. Even though you didn't brave the weather, you don't get the bagels afterwards, so tough to you. This is the second of our TCS lectures, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Upcoming, because I have to tell you guys what's coming up in the near term. On March 2nd, Jen Delaney, who is going to walk in here very shortly, is going to explain why a busy book publisher decided to become president of TCS. That's on a Sunday morning. And then we'll be followed by two physicians. Michaela Farber is going to speak on April 28th about women's health issues, and Paul Schreiber is going to speak on May 12th about lessons that he learned from a career in pediatrics. You're invited. They'll be here at TCS with some sort of food afterwards for informal discussions, so please come. Today we're going to hear from Tal Shechter about the situation in the Middle East as reported in the Israeli press, which is different from the situation that we get apparently in the American press. Tal assures me that this is a very up-to-date talk in that he reviewed the articles about Marco Rubio's meeting with Netanyahu a few minutes ago and didn't have to change his slides as a result. So Tal will speak for about half an hour, followed by Q&A. Folks on Zoom, if you have a question, put it into the chat and we'll figure out somehow a way to read those and answer them. Folks on YouTube, you don't get to ask questions, so tough. And then everybody who is here and braved the weather gets bagels and coffee afterwards so we can keep talking. Tal, thank you very much for speaking to us. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. It's yours.
Thank you, Gary and Rabbi, for helping organize that. As Gary mentioned, I've been following the Israeli press, and at some point it occurred to me that the difference and that the media here is so distorted that even people who are sympathetic to Israel and are getting a very distorted picture. So I talked to Gary and Rabbi and decided to do this. I got to tell you, I had a lot of fun putting it together. It wasn't that hard to put it together. I had spent much more time trying to condense it to half an hour. So it's a very condensed form so that we have time to discuss it and have you ask questions and talk about those issues. So I'm not going to tell you that the media in Israel is not biased. It is biased like any other media, and I'm not going to tell you that I'm not biased. I am biased like every other person. But we can still look at the information and examine the bias and do our best to get as close as we can to the truth. I'm also not going to tell you that what really happened in Israel or justified in any way anything Israel has done. Instead, I'd like to offer to you the view from Israel as best as I can figure it out and let you do what you find suitable to do with that information. As you can imagine, there's no one Israeli view about anything. And when I speak about the view from Israel, I'm talking about the prevailing view, as if there is one. I'm going to focus on the Israeli view, but that is not because, it's only because of the limit of time. I'm not going to talk about the Palestinian issue or narrative or suffering, not because it doesn't exist. I acknowledge it. I just don't have the time to talk about it. I'm only going to focus on the Israeli view. So if we're going to talk about the truth, we have to acknowledge that truth in general has objective and subjective aspects. Even though facts exist in the objective reality, we can all just perceive it subjectively. And we all tend to interpret and understand things that happen by comparing them to our own experiences. And I hope that this discussion will help you understand better the Israeli view and feel better about what's going on in Israel and being associated with Israel as Jews. I guess I skipped that. I was talking about this slide before, about the two aspects of the truth, and remembering we all construe it according to our own experience, which is unique to each one of us. And therefore, we cannot really understand, as Israelis do, what happened on October 7. Nobody who wasn't in Israel on October 7 can understand what it was like to be there on October 7. For Israelis, the attack on October 7 was a vicious attempt to wipe them out. How can you possibly know what it feels like when 1,000 people are rushing towards you to kill you? By so many different accounts and in so many different ways, Israel is just a different country since October 7. So to talk about a little bit about background about Gaza, I had a pretty big background, condensed it to a couple of slides, just to give you a basic idea. So in 1946, there were 60,000 inhabitants in Gaza. There were no refugees. In 1948 or 49, 200,000 refugees from Israel arrived to Palestine, to Gaza. Today, we have 2.1 million. So from 48 to today, the same 200,000 have become 2 million. And the humanitarian crisis that we all have heard about started in 1948 and stayed in different degrees till today. I don't want to get too technical, but to me it seems kind of cuckoo. Another point that worth mentioning is that in 2005, Israel withdrew unilaterally from Gaza, leaving the Philadelphia corridor open, or in other words, the border with Egypt open. That is, to me, very significant because it means Israel was not surrounding Gaza. It couldn't be possibly occupying Gaza. It had a border, it had a sea blockade, it didn't allow air to come in, but it was an open border with Egypt. And since 2005, the Gazans had got billions of dollars in aid and were free to build houses or school or hospitals, and we know what they chose to do with it. Dug tunnels and manufacture rockets. Okay, so we're getting now to the media distortion. The first one that I've seen is the key distortion in the US media is generated by not showing or playing down what to every Israeli seems like the basic elements of this conflict, which is one, this conflict started when Israel was attacked on October 7, and two, that since then Israel has been fighting to eliminate the threat against it. It wasn't that we just started shooting at them, they started shooting at us from their territory, from Lebanon and from Gaza, that Israel was not doing anything with. They started shooting at us, and we didn't just start shooting back. Israelis don't see it as tit for tat, as it's often described in the media here. It's seen as eliminating an active threat against it. So when people ask, how many people are you going to kill? The answer is, until there's no people who wants to kill us, and actively attempt to do that. And in the US media, that side of it is either ignored completely or put down, as I will demonstrate. And my point is, by ignoring or diminishing those two key elements, the media is distorting. It presents Israel as the aggressor without showing why it's doing it. And seeing it day after day, like we have here for over a year, it's no wonder that people get the image that Israel is the aggressor here. So the typical, and over the years it's been almost every year, the typical format that we see articles and TV pieces starts with the Israeli attack. Israel attacked and how many people were killed. If it's on TV, you see a picture of destroyed houses, you see people crying and saying that they didn't do anything. The target of the Israeli attack is either not mentioned at all, or if it is, it's in the end and in the form of the IDF claims that kind of diminishing it. In the Israeli media, it's a kind of a mirror image of that. The heading of the article or the TV piece is always about the target of the attack. What has been targeted? It's always called terrorist, with the word terrorist, and that it has been eliminated, using the word eliminated. Then there is the elaboration about that, just like in the American, there's the major piece is the elaboration of the Israeli attack. In Israel, it's the elaboration on the terrorist target. And then in Israel, at the end, there is either not mention of casualties, or if there is, it's at the end and minimized. The issues stressed in Israel are deflated in the US, and those stressed in the US are deflated in Israel. So let's try to be charitable towards the media and assume that the profit-driven media is trying to do what they think their audience wants to hear. So the media in Israel thinks that Israelis want to hear about how their active threat against it is being eliminated, and they don't want to hear so much about collateral damage. And in the US media believe that the media wants to hear about casualties and why Jews, Israel is killing all these people, and would prefer not to hear about the cause and justification of that. So here's one example from January this year from CNN. Look at the headline. It starts with Israeli strike. Look at the beginning of the article. 11 people got killed. People, not terrorists. Or in other words, another one they'll refer to as Palestinian, not terrorist. All the elaboration is the accusation of the Palestinian on the Israeli attack. That's all the elaboration. And the Israeli view is presented as equal afterwards. That's what Israel is saying. That's what Hamas is saying. Note also the names of the um, the reporters that wrote this piece, they're all Arab names. They're probably Palestinians. Whether Arabs or foreign, they are under Hamas's control. And it has been documented for years how Hamas abuses and threatened the reporters. Some of the people who participated in the October 7 were later seen as reporters, and reporters were used systematically as part of the Hamas's attack on October 7. Simultaneously, they came out with a PR report where they used Hamas's reporters. And a lot of because Israel didn't allow foreign reporters in, a lot of the sources for the world media are Hamas's people, essentially. And also notice that in the end, at the very end, there's a reference to the October 7, and also in terms of timing, not in terms of this is what started the whole thing. So here is the Israeli version of the same event from the same day. It'll be easier to review it in English. I translated it. So notice it starts with the target. The IDF attacked the commander of Hamas's intelligence security. The Air Force attacked, eliminated. That's what was done in Israeli views. Look at the elaboration on the terrorist attack, how bad this guy is. He is torturing people. He is investigating residents violently, and the whole elaboration is about the terror attack. None of that is mentioned in CNN. And at the very end, Israel mentioned that there was some casualties. The Palestinians say exactly the mirror opposite of how it's done in the States. Another kind of distortion I found systematic throughout both US media and a lot of UN reports is applying a different standard to Israel that has not been used for any other similar situation. Now, it is hard to find similar situation because how many countries have been attacked for decades trying to eliminate it? But just trying to understand it, the closest things that we have gone through recently that could be considered similar is 9/11. We didn't feel that marauding hordes are coming to kill us, but we did feel we were attacked in our own countries. We did feel a lot of our fellow countrymen were killed and felt sorry for that. And we did feel like we wanted our security people to take care of it and eliminate the threat so it doesn't happen again. So as you may recall, in the days after 9/11, hundreds of Arab-looking people were arrested in New York City, held without seeing a lawyer and being charged for weeks. 2 Arab-looking people were killed, thinking they were Indians, but they thought they were Arabs, so that's related to 9/11. And within a few weeks, we started carpet bombing in Afghanistan. Do you recall at the time being concerned about women and children being killed by those bombing, or did you feel our army is doing what it needs to be done to eliminate the threat against us? So none of this comparison justify is whatever Israel has done. 2 wrongs don't make right. But I do think it makes 2 key points. One is when you are under fire, when you feel under threat, when it's your sons and daughter who are fighting in the army, your perception of what's right and wrong changes considerably. The other point about that is that applying a different standard to Israel than to anybody else is a form of anti-Semitism. It's kind of soft anti-Semitism. It doesn't involve hate. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of people holding this view are genuinely unaware of it. But somehow, when Jews are killed, it's not so bad, at least not as bad as when we are killed. And when Jews kill, it is very bad, certainly much worse than when we kill. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask you, do you know how many people were killed in Gaza? Whatever your last recollection of the number. 45,000. Anybody has? 75,000. 100,000. Okay, yeah, there have been various reports. But we all heard those numbers. Now, how many Israelis were killed in Gaza? Anybody heard? Gaza? Yeah. Or in Gaza. I mean, we were talking about how many people. I said people. And you took it as Palestinians. So I'm saying Israelis in Gaza. Are you talking about IDF? Yeah, IDF. So you're not so sure. How many people did the U.S. kill in Afghanistan? Anybody here? How about in Syria? In Iraq? In Somalia? In Yemen? How many women and children? How many Palestinians did Hamas kill and torture in Gaza? Anybody here? How many people did Hezbollah kill in Syria? Nothing. Nothing has been talked about it. We have heard day after day how many Palestinians were killed in Gaza, but nothing about that. So again, that's what creates this picture of Israel is killing a lot of people, not the actual people, and not comparing it to other similar situations. As far as what are those real numbers of how many people were killed in Afghanistan, there's no clear answer, there's no consensus, there's been many studies. So I'm not giving it as definite numbers, but it's worth looking at a couple of serious studies. One of them by Brown University puts the total number of deaths out of post 9/11 wars at 4.5 million people. Now, out of this, 3.6 to 3.7 are indirect, which means they weren't shot, but they were killed as a result of famine, disease caused by the US attack. There's another study, different one, that puts the number of direct deaths at 906 people. Out of them, 387,000 civilians and 38 million people displaced or refugees. Again, that's the whole area. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Yemen. So we haven't heard those numbers. Those numbers are, if this is not accurate, are much, much, much greater than what Israel has done in Gaza. Now let's talk about some of the accusations that Israel has been accused. Again, I did the whole thing about all the accusations. We don't have time to talk about that. I'll just pick a few of them. If anybody wants to ask about other accusations, I'm happy to talk about it later, send you material, whatever. But let's start with the accusation that Israel bears some responsibility for the Hamas attack on October 7 because it created the Palestinian problem in 1948 and let it fester ever since. So while there is some truth to that, of course Israel bears some responsibility. To hear that as a response to talking about October 7, for me, for most Israelis, is ridiculous. If you're condemning the Hamas attack, there should not be any but. It's not, but it's in context like the Secretary General of the UN said. As far as to the specifics, number one, as I mentioned, the refugee problem started in 48, 77 years ago. It's been kept a problem by UNRWA, by the international support that specifically is designed to keep them as Palestinian, as refugees, and not go ahead with their life. There were tens of millions of refugees at the same time after World War II. None of them are refugees anymore. Only Palestinians, and only UNRWA is the only UN agencies that is dedicated only to Palestinians. And again, in 2005, Israel withdrew, left the Palestinians to do what they want, and they chose to go in this path. Another accusation is indiscriminate bombing. It's very common. Usually it's not mentioned, as a matter of fact, without any support why the reporter think it was indiscriminate. So what does indiscriminate means? It means marked by, not marked by careful distinction. So how does the reporter know that Israel didn't consider each house before it bombed it and decided to bomb that house or those houses? There's no reference to that. It could be, but there's most of the accusation of indiscriminate bombing has no support at all, and the support that I did see is, I could figure out what's wrong with it within 5 minutes on Google. So it wasn't very serious. There's also, while there's no evidence there was indiscriminate, there was ample evidence that there were terrorists and weaponry in hospitals, in schools, in homes. In Israel, it was shown daily. Every day there was a report from what it was found. It wasn't shown here. So let's go to genocide. I want to talk a little bit more about that, both because it's the worst accusation, and it's also, I think the way to deal with it is the same way to deal with all the other accusation, which is look at what is the definition of accusation and then how it's proven. So, oh, I'm talking about the next slide, I'm sorry. Torture and mistreatment. Well, I said in the beginning, I'll say that the Israeli view, if there is one. On this one, there isn't. It's all over the place. There's people for it, against it. It's a very hot potato right now. It's subject to fights between courts, between the courts and the military, between political parties. I would say the way I look at it is, number one, I'm convinced that there was torture. I saw enough testimonies by soldiers, Israeli soldiers online, reporting what they saw. I believe that. From what I see, I'm not too bent out of shape about it. The way I see it is, Israel is a normal country. It has murderers and rapists and bank robbers and war criminals, like any other country. And we have to live that as long as we put these people in jail. And that's where the conflict now in Israel. It is being fought, and some people are saying openly, the terrorists that attacked us on October 7, we can torture them, we can do anything to them. It's been said in parliament, in public. So it's subject to a struggle. Stay tuned. Hopefully Israel will find the right bearing, but it is being disputed. So now going to genocide and talking about what it means and how to deal with it. So the word genocide did not exist before World War II. It was made up by a good Jewish lawyer in Poland in 1942. It was made up to describe the Holocaust. And it didn't have any legal meaning until 1948. Between this time, until it became a legal meaning, definition, there was a struggle how to define it legally. And the struggle was between people who wanted to code it in a way to stop mass killings, and the US and Russia trying to make sure that what they have done and are planning to keep doing is not going to be part of that definition. So what has been put into the definition is the intent. Genocide has to be done with intent to kill people, and it is very difficult to prove in a court intent, and that was on purpose. That's why it was put in there. So here's the legal definition by the UN, the Convention on Prevention of Punishment. Any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole and part, today, conflicts around the globe, including Israel war in Gaza and Russia's war in Ukraine, the persecution of Myanmar and Rwanda, are subject to a debate, and there is consideration on, and debate about changing the legal definition of genocide. It may change. It hasn't changed. According to the current definition and how it has been applied in the last 80 years, there's no anything even close that proves that Israel has intent to kill people. Again, remembering that Israel responded to an attack makes a big difference. And again, knowing that every day Israel was destroying specific threats against it makes a difference. That hasn't been reported here. Now back to Israel again. I had a whole big section that I reduced. Just a few quick points about the situation in Israel. Israel is a country in trauma. One study estimates that the total cost in the next 5 years of treating PTSD is $50 billion, which is 10% of Israel's annual GDP. Another group reported 950% increase in calls related to anxiety, trauma, and suicide. Another one that 75% of Israelis suffer from mental exhaustion. 80,000 Israelis left the countries in 2024. And before we talk about more, just on a personal note, I can tell you my 71-year-old sister fell down the stairs while running to the bomb shelters in the middle of the night last month. She broke her elbow. She had to be operated. She's okay. My other sister's grandson wrote a letter to the mayor asking him to make the siren less scary. What I found to kind of wrap it up in the best way is an article by Professor Yuval Noah Harari. You probably heard about him. He wrote back in October 2023 this article that really sums it up. Just few short parts from this article. He said, most Israelis are psychologically incapable at this moment of empathizing with Palestinians. The mind is filled to the brim with our own pain, and no space is left to acknowledge the other. Most Palestinians are in an analogous situation. Their minds are too filled with pain, and they cannot see our pain. But outsiders that are not themselves immersed in the pain should make the effort to empathize with all suffering humans rather than lazily seeing only part of this reality. That's it. Summary is the situation in Gaza is horrific. There's too many innocent women and children who are killed, but this is what unfortunately happened in a war. The IDF is an army, and like all armies in all wars ever, it kills. One could reasonably claim that the IDF could have done more to minimize civilian casualties. One could also reasonably consider the very complex urban environment of the fighting, the enemy that developed elaborate schemes of hiding behind civilians, as well as the unprecedented innovative methods the IDF developed to minimize civilian casualties. And it is not easy to hear the terrible accusation against Israel. We can handle them by looking at each point, that is the accusation, the definition of it, the factual basis for it. Is it true or not? And then compare it to what other civilized countries have done recently. And one more suitable poem from 1895 that is often associated with the expression walk a mile in my shoes, judge softly. Pray don't find fault with the man who leaps or stumble along the road unless you have worn the moccasins he wears or stumbled beneath the same load. Just walk a mile in his moccasin before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Take the time to walk a mile in his moccasin. And I'll leave you with this other quote, those who judge will never understand, and those who understand will never judge. That's it. Now, we can talk about anything you would like to.
One quick thing, when they talked about the amount of people killed in Gaza during October 7th, people don't add to that the natural amount of people who died during that time. I mean, if we didn't have any wars, there would be people dying in Gaza also, and that's not subtracted from the amount of people dying. And I know that that's not in Hamas, in any.
Right. Well, like, okay. The question was the published number of casualties in Gaza relates to the total number of deaths and does not separates the number of normal deaths. That's true, but then there's also people who are buried under destroyed houses that haven't been counted. In any war, there's always no number should be taken as accurate. It's a rough number. Yep.
Two questions. One was, how's it viewed internally within Israel with the change in the, it's out there that the segment of the population that is not required to serve in the army is now eligible to be conscripted into the army. I don't know the terminology. How's that been received in Israel? And then the second question is, how is it received in Israel because the proposals that the U.S. just go to Gaza opponent, basically?
Right.
It sounds preposterous to many of us, but I don't know what the reception is there.
Okay. The question was, what about the portion of the Israeli population that has not been drafted into the army? And another question about the recent announcement by Trump that U.S. should own Gaza. So for the first point, it has been a festering issue for at least 20 years. It started with Ben-Gurion allowing ultra-Orthodox that were back then 400 to not be drafted into the army, and it got into many, many thousands, over 100,000 that are not being drafted. And especially now when the load on The rest of the population was so high, when people had to do reserve duty for hundreds of days a year, it sticks out, and people are demanding a change now. It is, the two things I can say about it is, one, the coalition will not pass this law, does not pass this law, because if they do, the ultra-Orthodox will get out of the coalition and the government will fall. And any coalition, their criticism of the opposition that demands that is saying, if you were in coalition, you wouldn't be able to do that. On the other hand, there is a lot of effort from both the ultra-Orthodox and from other parties to find a way to get the ultra-Orthodox into the army. There's one program that gets them into 8200. It's a very prestigious intelligence unit that they put together a way for the Orthodox to do as part of their job in a separate environment where it is kosher to their liking. And because it's prestigious, it is accepted by the ultra-Orthodox because it is, they see that there's a very tough selection process and only really smart people get in, and it is accepted. So there is hope. But it is a very bitter cause for struggle in Israel. The ultra-Orthodox feel they are doing their job by praying. They feel very strongly about it, and they are demonstrating we will not go. And the rest of the people saying, you can't be in this country and not serve in the army. As to Trump proposition, I've seen anywhere from that's great, why did it take so long for anybody to say that, to he's crazy, what is he talking about, this can never happen. I would say that the difference between most people here and most people there is the Israeli population used to be split between people who said, we're not sure how exactly, but we got to give them a state. The two-state solution is the solution. We're not going to find any in Wales. They're normal people. If they have a state, they will leave us alone. To the other half that said, no, they want the whole thing. If we give them anything, they'll just use it to get it. That was all along from the beginning of the country. Recently, the part that says two-state solution is pretty much gone. After October 7, very few people said, yeah, we're comfortable with the Palestinian state along the center of the country. They can do the same thing. How can we stop them? There are some people who believe in it, but they are a much smaller minority now. Yep.
Okay, Tal. You presented the information from Israel, disinformation or other information, Palestinians. Why is it that Israel seems to always lose the information? And is it strictly, the Palestinians play the victim card, we know that.
Right.
You're going to get sympathy that way. But is it more than that?
I think that's the main part of it. This question is asked a lot all over the place in Israel. Everybody acknowledges it, sees it. Specifically in this conflict, there was an unbelievable coordinated attack on October 7 online people in Israel asking exactly the same thing. How did we not have something similar? How can they do that and we don't? We're the smart ones. We have cyber. Well, I don't have an answer. Nobody has an answer. I don't know. Sorry. Yep.
Can you talk more on Qatar and maybe their influence on the marketing war of on their
Yeah, okay, yeah, the question was, what about Qatar and their influence on the situation? Qatar is a very interesting entity. They're a small country in the Gulf. They have tons of money. They have been using tons of money for decades, investing in universities in the States to shift people towards the Palestinian view. For decades. Universities have opened sections of their group in Qatar and in no other place. They have been funding Hamas with the approval of the Israeli government. One of the very controversial issues right now is that senior people from the Prime Minister office were conducting a PR campaign for Qatar. They were paid to do PR for Qatar at the time that they did football or soccer games. It is known that Qatar wants to wipe out Israel. It's doing a lot to do that. How the Prime Minister office is connected to that, it's a subject to investigation by the police. But it is a very important force. Everybody talks about Iran. Iran is definitely the leader of instigating the whole thing, financing the whole thing. Qatar has been doing it quietly under the radar for a long time. Yep. Okay. Yep.
Good morning. Thank you very much for coming and to your presentation. My wife is Chris. I have been to Egypt countless times. I know exactly where the attack took place. And I also know there were no Israelis at the gate, to defend the gates of the kibbutz on the day of the attack. There were no Israelis there to protect the people living in the kibbutzes at the border. The Arabs just walked in. Are you aware of it? And if you are, can you explain to me how that could be allowed to happen?
Did everybody hear that question?
Yeah, repeat the question.
Okay. This is Ira. He is saying, I know the area. I've been there. On October 7, there were no soldiers at the gate of the kibbutz. Can you explain that? So I laughed because Israelis have been asking that in many ways every day since then. The best way to answer it is what Israel called the conception. There was a conception that got through the entire leadership, the government, the political leadership, the military leadership, the intelligence leadership, which said Hamas is deterred. They know that if they do anything serious, we will hit them really hard. We're giving them money to build house and be power and be happy. And worst comes to worst, they can do an attack of 3 or 4 or 5 people, 10 people. That's it. That's what Hamas has done in the past. What Hamas actually has done on October 7 was known to Israeli army and intelligence. They knew they're planning it. They saw them training. They saw the communication between them. On the night before, they saw that thousands of SIM cards are changed from Gaza to Israel. And they picked that the only reason to do that is they're going to be in Israel, thousands of them. The intelligence head called the chief of staff of the army, and they had a meeting in the middle of the night, and they said, okay, we'll have a meeting in the morning with the prime minister. it was just hard to understand how conception can get through so many people. It was the entire leadership. There were a few people, voices that said, hey, look at that. We have to be careful. And they were shushed. It's okay, don't worry about it. The big guys know it's nothing. Yep.
Can you talk about Israelis meeting with Netanyahu after post-October 7th? So I know that before October 7th he wasn't very popular. And now that piggybacking on what you said, that this would allow it to happen.
Right.
So how has the opinion changed at this point?
Okay. The question was, how is Netanyahu's popularity change after October 7th? So I wouldn't say before this he wasn't popular. He has a fairly small group that support him no matter what. It's kind of similar to Trump. Trump cannot do anything. There's some group that will support Trump no matter what he does. Same with Netanyahu. This group is, I don't know, maybe 20, 25% of the population. And most other people thought he wasn't suitable and still think he is terrible. After October 7, his popularity dropped quite a bit, and since then have gone back up. It is kind of close. If there was an election tomorrow, it is not clear that he would lose. Again, because of the situation, the political system, he can put together a coalition just as easy as the opposition right now. And if his party gets the biggest vote, he gets to put together the coalition. If the two of the next two size parties get together, they will be the bigger one. And they will form the coalition, but they cannot get together.
I have another question, sorry, real quickly. Can you talk a little bit about the college demonstrations that happened last year on college campuses? The reason they were doing them really was to get their schools to divest in Israel,
Yeah.
and that, what do you think, how do you think the schools handled it as far as, some of the presidents of the colleges were taken out by the way they handled it? What do you think they could have done differently?
The question was, what about the demonstrations in the States in universities, the demand to divest in Israel, and what could the universities have done different? One perspective is I'm convinced that a big part of this picture is the Qatari investment for decades. They have very slowly and methodically invested and made PR and made friends, and gently pushed people and encouraged people who are against Israel. And that was one effect. The other side, I would say, universities tend to be more on the left side, and the left side is more susceptible to looking at the world in oppressor and oppressed. And in this picture, Israel is the oppressor. They are stronger, they're more powerful, they're killing more people. Without the context of the background and the comparison to other situations, those people genuinely believe that Israel is really bad and really doing bad things. And the UN is unbelievable lately. They put out tons of reports without any support, any evidence, with the worst genocide and ethnic cleansing. And I mean, now that we know that the Gazan went back to the home, it looks ridiculous. But for a year, they were saying famine, famine, they're going to starve. Nobody starved. ethnic cleansing, they're kicked out. They all came back. But it didn't stop the UN from putting tons of report that totally degrade Israel. As far as what university has done better, I think it's being fought now. There's a lot of Jewish groups that support for it. The ADL is very active in talking to university administration and finding better ways. And it does move in that direction. I don't know how far exactly or where it is at, but I've read a lot about this process. Yep.
Are you waiting longer than I need? No, it's fine. So, no, because I saw the answer before. So, we hear a lot about the condition of the hostages that are released by Hamas back to Israel. The initial ones were in better shape, and then the last ones maybe not as well. We never hear anything about the condition of the hundreds of criminals that Israel sends back as part of that deal to get the hostages back. Do you hear anything in the Jewish media about the condition of the people that Israel is sending back to Hamas?
The question was, what about we heard a lot about the condition of the hostages while being held by Hamas. What about the prisoners that Israel released? How they're being treated. Just first one point, a lot of those prisoners are convicted criminals, convicted killers, but not all of them. There are hundreds of people who were detained in Gaza and haven't been accused yet. They were just interrogated briefly, found to be probably terrorists, and kept in jail for the duration of the conflict, and have been released. Those that have been convicted is a huge source for consternation in Israel. Sinwar, the leader of this of Hamas that instigated the whole thing, was in prison, was operated on and cured from cancer, and released, and did this thing. So we know those people that are released are not going to drop their waist and continue to do their thing, and it's a huge boost for the next generation that now can say we can do terrorism. Worst comes to worst, we will get caught, we'll spend a few years in jail, and then we'll get released. So it is a big problem. It is, for the first time, there is strong and vocal opposition to that way. There are people saying, let's not do that. Let's not release those prisoners because, yeah, we're saving those hostages, but then we're going to have more people killed in the future. That hasn't happened before, and now it is. There's not a lot of them, but they're vocal, and there's enough of them to demonstrate, and they have parties in the parliament. So.
The health, the conditions, the physical condition of those prisoners that are released is there any news of that being like they're really not in good condition, or they've been treated very well by Israel?
I haven't seen anything specific to that. I have seen reports about Israel mistreatment of prisoners in jails. There's a very big difference about people who were taken during the fighting. Those are illegal combatants, and people who are convicted in jail, those are handled by the jail system. And the jail system has a new minister, Ben Gvir, who one of the first things that he said when he took power is, we're going to make things tough for them. We're going to go exactly by the law. Whatever the law international said they're going to be fed, that's what we're going to give them. And Um, you know, it's a big system. If you say go exactly by the law, sometimes they miss a meal or whatever. So it could be that they are mistreated in that way. As far, right, right. More people from the crowd.
Yeah, so there's someone else on Zoom with a question. Jerry.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Can you hear me, Tal?
Yeah,
Good to see you. I'm sorry I'm not there in person,
sure.
particularly for the breakfast. But so thank you for your talk. Very sober, very informative. I like your kind of neutral approach. You don't seem particularly biased. But I want to take us back to just before the October 7th attack.
Uh-huh.
Israel and Saudi Arabia were on the cusp of a historic treaty agreement that would have transformed relations in the Middle East. I've read that Iran didn't like that, and that Iran was in support of both Hezbollah and Hamas, engineered the October 7th attack. It's obviously took a long time for strategic planning, etc. So since then, suddenly Israel looks to the world like the aggressor. Notwithstanding everything that you pointed out to us, and we know that that's not true. Any country put in Israel's position would have done the same, and certainly the United States is as guilty as everybody. But I guess what I'm asking, what you think, where do we go from here? Netanyahu has been deeply criticized because he's offered nothing to suggest that he has a plan going forward. Donald Trump's idea is at best silly, and at its worst a major distraction, and completely denigrates the rights of the Gazans, who have considered that place home for 72 years. So, but that's a long introduction to asking you. So, where do you think we go from here?
Right. Okay. Jerry's mentioning or reminding that probably one of the causes or impetus for the October 7 attack was the normalization of relations between U.S., Saudi, and possibly Israel, that it was on the table, it was close to being done. Iran saw it as a major threat and instigated this attack. And since then, Netanyahu has been criticized for not offering any solution, so where do we go from here? It has been a tough question to resolve for 70 years, and it's not different. It does look like Trump has a few initiatives to normalize relationship with Saudi Arabia. I think that will be great for Israel. Certainly for Israel to be part of a global coalition that includes the U.S. and Saudi Arabia would be the best thing it can do to keep Iran at bay. But the Palestinian question remains and has been kept, in my mind, as absurd. I mean, they were refugees. They deserve all the help we could give them in 1948 to get back on their feet, not for 80 years. That's absurd. What did they do? Where did they go from now? I don't know. They don't want to go to Egypt and Jordan. Jordan and Egypt doesn't want them there. I don't know. I don't know where we go from here. Probably to another conflict in 5 to 10 years. That's what has been going, and I don't see why it wouldn't continue that way. I don't see anything different. Yeah.
So do you think that a two-state
So-
solution is legally possible at this point?
Jerry's asking, is the two-state solution off the table? Most people I saw that wrote about it have considered it dying or dead for a while. Both because there's so many Israelis in the West Bank now. There's 500,000 of them, whereas 20 years ago, or actually in 2005, when Sharon did the unilateral withdrawal from Gaza, he was going to do the same thing in West Bank later. That's probably not going to happen with 500,000 people. And like I said, the majority of Israelis cannot imagine allowing a Palestinian state so close to its center. If you want, the only positive outlooks I've seen are that with the leadership of Saudi Arabia and the cooperation of Egypt, they will put together a professional committee that will be technocrats that will run Gaza with Saudi Arabia and Egyptian soldiers keeping taking of security so that Hamas can be taken out, and that doing that for a number of years will I don't know what's the term, after World War II, they talk about denazifications of Germans, de-extremizing the Palestinians. The Palestinians are still, both in Gaza and the West Bank, being taught from grade 1 to hate Jews. Their schools include horrible anti-Semitic attributes and glorifying the people who were terrorists. How would we ever have a possible solution before we stop that? So if that's stopped and people see that they can have a better life, maybe after a few years of that, Israel could see its way to allowing Palestinian rules on demilitarized West Bank. But that's way in the future, and but that's the only positive aspect I can see. Yep, Jen? Jewish what?
Jewish-related news. What is your thoughts on bias in regards to the forward and tablet?
As regard to
The forward and tablet. The two
forward and
tablet.
tablet?
So are you familiar with them?
No, I'm
No.
not.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Never mind your notes.
Mike, wanted to? Yep.
Back after the end of the war, Golden Meir and Shaddai were put in for tribute and both were forced to resign. Because of what happened here, the defense minister and Abu will also be put before his trial when things get settled out. Were they forced to resign also?
Trial for what?
Back in the 78 war,
Yeah.
Golden Meir and
Right.
Shaddai and both were forced to resign because they caught off guard.
Right. I got you. Right. Okay. Sorry, I got that now. We're talking about the forward and tablet, the newspapers. Okay, I heard it and didn't connect. The question was, I don't know about that. I'm not familiar with them. But to answer Mike, Mike is asking in 73, not 78, the Yom Kippur War, the prime minister and there was an investigation and people were fired. Is that going to happen now with Netanyahu? Yeah, she resigned. She resigned. Right. So that's another very hot potato right now in Israel. There is a very strong demand from the public to have an investigation, not just to find the people responsible and fire them, but to find out what went wrong and how to make sure it doesn't happen again. People feel like they have been abandoned, and professional. The prime minister and defense minister have the overall ministerial responsibility, but on the professional level, there's talk about suing them for what do you call it when you do something wrong at work? Malpractice. Yeah. They were on professional level. That was their job, and they failed big time. And as a result, a lot of people died. So Netanyahu has been able to resist that. The excuse is that part of his argument is that part of the problem is the court system, and the investigation committee by Israeli law is picked by the Chief Justice. He picks the people to be in his in the committee, and the government decide on the mandate of the government of the committee, and then this committee has legal power to call people to testify, to force people to testify, not to put people in jail. They just announce their finding, and then the authority has to either follow the recommendation or not. So there has been committees like that that said this one went wrong, this one wrong, this one wrong, and nothing happened. This time, because Netanyahu said the court system is part of the problem, we shouldn't let the Chief Justice put together this committee. We should put the government should put the committee. And we shouldn't go ahead with it because there is no complete public support and trust in a committee that will be assigned by the Chief Justice. Very few people believe that, but that's what he's saying. And like I said, politically, he has been able to get away with it. Yep.
It's interesting. I was listening to somebody. I just want to know if you know this or agree with it. In all of mankind's wars from the beginning, there's never been a civilian population in the war zone that has been denied the ability to leave the war zone. And so, while, you know, whoever's mentioning it, Trump or whoever, but the idea of saying, look, this area is not livable, and people certainly are dying just from, I mean, from disease and from everything else, and it's still very dangerous, and there's bombs that need to be cleared. And the second point is that Hamas is not going to be in charge, and but they are not allowing a freedom of choice of the Palestinians that are in Gaza to leave. And this is the first time in history of the world that you have the international Western community, and the whole Arab community hypocritically saying they care about the Palestinians, but you shouldn't have a choice as to whether you can leave to another area where we could, I mean, where you have space. I mean, Egypt is 50 times the size of Israel. Even if the idea was to build a community there temporarily, let Hamas be destroyed, and then bring them back after they are vetted, possibly, and have rights to return. But I'm just saying, I don't know if I want to know if you or someone who I know
Okay, the question was, what about letting the Palestinian from Gaza get out of the war zone? It's unprecedented that a civilian population is forced to stay in the war zone and not being allowed to leave, and that it's hypocritical for the Arab countries to say they want to take care of Palestinians, but are not willing to let them in and take care of them in their country. So as far as letting them out, that's only Egypt. Egypt is the only country that has a border with Gaza, and yeah, they have kept it closed since 1948. It's worth mentioning that at the same time 200,000 Palestinian refugees arrived to Gaza, 200,000 refugees arrived to Jordan. And Jordan gave them citizenship and integrated them into their country. They're still legally refugees, but they have decent life. They are part of society. Whereas Egypt didn't give them citizenship, didn't let them out of the Gaza Strip, kept them in Gaza, and that's why they're there. What they're saying is these people deserve to go back to their homes. And in 1949, that was an unreasonable position. In 2005, I think it is cuckoo, but that's what they're saying. And the one thing everybody is finding refreshing about what Trump is saying about letting them out is even those people who are saying it's ridiculous and unrealistic and not legal, it is refreshing that people are saying, oh, wait a minute, what about these people? How are they refugees? Those are the grandchildren of people that ran away in 1948. How come they're still refugees? How come there's still a humanitarian crisis? They were kept there by not just the Arab states, by the international community. The United States, Europe, Germany is a huge contributor, have been paying money and giving supports for decades because they said these people need to go back to their homes in Israel. That, like I said, it wasn't unreasonable in 1949, but 80 years later, it's cuckoo. Yeah.
Two questions. One, what is your best estimate on the numbers of Palestinians and Israelis killed during October 7th? And two, can you talk about this idea of soft anti-Semitism?
Sorry, the last.
Can you talk more about this idea of soft anti-Semitism? You said that Israel's being, some view it as Israel's being unfairly held to a different standard.
Right.
I haven't really thought of it in that lens. A lot of people would say, for example, a lot of people have said, well, Israel's committing genocide. So
Right.
it should be held to that standard.
Right. Say it again, the last sentence.
And some people have said, you know, well, some people view it as, I mean, the International Criminal Court has said Israel is committing genocide. And
Right.
Maybe they should be held to that standard.
Right.
And it's not, so I didn't really call that the lens of soft anti-Semitism.
Right. Okay, the question was on the number of casualties, Israeli and Palestinians, since October 7, and a question about what I mentioned as soft anti-Semitism of holding Israel to a different standard, and shouldn't Israel be considered or investigated for crime, war crimes and genocide. So in terms of number of casualties, I don't have a strong opinion on the number. I've seen a lot of them. The most published ones are the ones we talked about here. Those are published by Hamas. They have been checked by UN and reportedly accurate. It's been said that it includes all the number of deaths, including natural death, and not including people who were not found under the destroyed houses. The number of Israelis is less than 1,000, including October 7. There was a lot of casualties, Israeli casualties, in the beginning, the first few days of the war, but since then it tapered down. There was very few here and there. There were a few weeks that there were more, but it was fairly small, of soldiers getting killed in battle, and very few that have been killed at home from missiles and rockets being shot at Israel. The vast majority of them were intercepted. The biggest damage it had is terrorizing the whole country for a year. When you hear a siren, you know a rocket is coming towards you to kill you. That's not very pleasant, even though you have a bomb shelter right next door. And being exposed to it again and again is terrorizing. And like I said, the biggest damage is the country is in trauma. In terms of the accusation against Israel of genocide, so as I mentioned, what it comes down to is the intent. And while I don't have any doubts in my mind that Israel never had the intent to just kill the Palestinians, I did look on every report I could find that claims that and look for what evidence they have. And whatever evidence they showed, I found ridiculous. I mean, they mentioned that some ministers were talking like, let's kill them all. That's not intent. That's not a plan. Again, if the definition of genocide is what happened in the Holocaust, where there was a plan to wipe out Jews, and it was implemented of going out and pulling people out of their houses and putting them on train and sending them to death. Nothing like that happened. A lot of innocent civilians were killed. Do I know that every single bomb or shell was accurate and aimed at a military target, which is what the law requires? Probably not. Many people I know that have looked into that and are respectable observers thinks that Israel committed war crimes. So every war has war crimes. I think Israel did commit war crimes, not genocide. The way it is defined now, that there is a lot of talk about changing the definition. If the definition is changed, then we can look at what Israel done and see if it fits the definition. But so far, I don't see it. Yeah.
So, two questions, one question. So, it seems like things have shifted away from thoughts that there would be a diplomatic solution to the problem to one of the military solution to the problem. To sustain a war effort requires, the political will of the government, it requires the will of the people to sustain it as well. And also, this was serves personal will to participate. It's not a volunteer argument. Everyone has to participate.
Right.
So what is from the Israeli press, what's the sense about the population's war fatigue, or like what they perceive the timeline of this to be, whether that's a sustainable timeline for the population to continue on military solution?
Right. The question was, we're talking about having a possible military solution or a peace agreement, and considering the military route, how is Israel viewing the load on the people, considering how much the army was overdrained during this war. So it's a major problem regardless of the solution. Regardless of the solution, Israel has to have an army that can protect it. And it is lacking right now. It has been acknowledged and it is addressed. The thought was for a long time that Israel can have a small, smart army that with high tech and a huge technological advantage, Israel can maintain all its enemy at bay with a small, smart army. That was shattered on October 7th. That's no longer is the case. And everybody in the army is saying we have to build more units, we have to have more tanks, we have to have more soldiers. And it is a problem. Trying to draft the ultra-Orthodox is one possible solution, but even if they are extremely successful, it's not going to resolve the army, resolve the problem. There's still going to be a huge drain on reserve duty, and it is both a problem in terms of people are saying, on one side, enough, we cannot take it anymore, to still, when it comes down to it, even though there were demonstrations and a very serious internal fighting before the war, with people feeling like the Netanyahu coalition is overthrowing the democratic rule, and were threatening to stop volunteering to the army. When it push come to shove, everybody went. And there is no problem right now with the army not having enough people. People are going, even though the load is so severe. But it is a very serious problem looking ahead, and there's no clear solution.
Can I,
whoops, sorry. Yep.
Can I intercede? And thank you, first of all. I know there are more questions, and we have coffee and bagels for people to ask questions next door. We've reached what in my business and education company we call our tush information limit. You can only absorb as much as your tush can handle. So thank you. This was fascinating. I really appreciate the amount of effort it took to put these slides together, and more effort to keep it succinct and manageable. So terrific. That was really good. I invite everybody to come back to hear Jen explain why a busy book publisher decided to become president of TCS in about 2 weeks. So we're going next door for bagels and coffee. Folks on Zoom, shalom. And thank you very much for coming.
A plus, Tal.
What?
A plus.
Thank you.
Time flies. Really helpful. Really